all, thank you all for your patience while we tested the microphone. But also, thank you all for coming this evening. My name is Sarah Hopkins. I'm the exhibitions director here at the Lansing Art Gallery and Education Center. And we are here celebrating the opening of the exhibition Transitory, a study of human anatomy and our own impermanence by artist Thiago Porraz, who is here with us this evening. So thank you again for being here. Yeah. And then myself, like everyone else here, we're all very eager to hear more about your work and about you. And then I do also just want to mention we're very excited to open up our mezzanine gallery where you are all sitting right now. This is our first formal exhibition in this space, and we're excited to have this space to offer more opportunities for Michigan artists to showcase their work and just, share their art with the Lansing community and beyond. So, yeah. So before we begin the Q&A portion of the talk, I'd love to give you an opportunity to just share a little bit more about yourself and anything that you really want to say to everyone before I start asking you some questions. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all for being here. I know some of you had a bit of a drive. This is my very first solo exhibition, so it's a very exciting time for me, and I really appreciate your presence here. So I'm just going to give a very quick introduction to who I am for those of you that don't know me, and then an introduction to what we have on the walls. I'm Thiago. I live in Grand Rapids. I've lived in Grand Rapids my entire life, and I've loved creating my entire life. I fell completely in love with painting in a high school art class, and after high school I did a couple of years of courses at MSU, studying studio art, and then a semester at Kendall College of Art and Design before deciding that school just was not for me and leaving. That was back in 2017, but I'm going to kind of fast forward to what we have on the walls here today. This collection is a culmination of 2 years of basically kind of rediscovering my passion for art. And it all starts with a piece titled January, which is this one behind you all, with the human heart and the dying roses. That piece started as kind of a way to work through a difficult breakup, but by the time I finished it, it really had a different significance to me, because it was the first really involved art piece I had completed in years after having left school. When I made the transition from school to working full-time in retail, I found it difficult to invest a lot of time in my art practice, and so I kind of got put on the back burner. I kind of lost that really strong passion I had for it. But when I completed this piece, it just sparked so much joy and pride and excitement that it was like my passion for art was just immediately reignited, and it was like a switch flipped, and I decided that I had to make art a much bigger priority in my life going forward. And so for the following 2 years, I made as much time as I possibly could for my art practice, and basically just spent 2 years kind of exploring and rediscovering what it is that I like to paint, how I like to paint, dusting off my old painting skills that I hadn't used in years, and kind of building on the skills that I had learned years ago in school. And so what we have on the walls here is essentially 9 of my favorite pieces from those 2 years of kind of rediscovering that passion. Now I'll open it up to your questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing. That's inspiring to hear, an artist who maybe stepped away from art just to come back to it. So it's a great way to introduce. All right, well, we'll go ahead with our questions. Start with the first one. So the title of the show is Transitory, a study of human anatomy and our own impermanence, which I think already begins to allude to what your show is about. Can you share a bit more about why you chose this title?
Yeah, so like I said, this was all kind of came from 2 years of just kind of exploring. It was also the first time I was making these kinds of pieces outside of a school environment, so I was able to just have the liberty to have no guidelines and just paint whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. And after kind of creating a bunch of work, I kind of took a step back and just kind of reflected on what I had been painting and noticing the subjects that I kind of repeatedly came back to and the themes that I tended to pop up in my work. You can definitely see some of those. There's a lot of bones, a lot of skulls, a lot of teeth, a lot of human hearts. And so in kind of stepping back and looking at what I had been doing, that thread of the theme of kind of life and death and growth and decay was kind of the one thread that really connected everything. So that's why I went with that title.
Excellent. Thank you. So next question. In your artist statement, you mentioned the temporary nature of existence and our own human experience. How does the work in this show speak to this concept?
I think the most obvious way is through the kind of imagery that evokes the kind of reminders of death, like bones and human organs that are no longer in their body. But I think the less obvious way that the work speaks to that is another reoccurring subject that I use in my work a lot, and that's flowers. Flowers to me are a really good representation of that cycle of life and death. I think 99% of the time when we see flowers, we see them when they're in bloom, because that's when they're the most beautiful, of course. But I also like to depict flowers when they're in the process of dying or completely dead, because of course flowers don't bloom forever; they bloom and then they die.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the first things you say in your statement is this is temporary. So that's definitely a great segue. What is some of the inspiration behind your work?
I find inspiration in a lot of different places. I would say typically I'll just be kind of going about my day and something completely random that I see or hear or say to someone will just kind of trigger an image to pop up in my head. And sometimes it's like the most unexpected thing. I'll give an example with the candy dish piece over here. I was at my parents' house and my mom had this red glass bowl, and I thought it was really beautiful, and if I shot some light through it, it would just be really cool to paint, and so this image popped up into my head. I'll give one more example. The piece on the end here, I worked in retail, like I mentioned in my introduction, for 7 years, and for the last few years, I was an operations supervisor, which meant that I was in charge of unloading our truck every week, which involved a lot of cutting open boxes, which is why I'm building that box cutter. And that image just kind of popped into my head one morning during a truck at probably like 6 a.m. I was just dead tired and didn't really want to be there. So that kind of was how I felt in the moment, and that image just kind of popped up in my head.
Yeah, thank you for providing some examples. So this body of work is primarily acrylic paintings in what you describe as a surrealist style. Can you speak more as to why you choose to work in this medium and style?
Yeah, I love to create in basically any 2D medium, not 3D. For some reason, my skills don't transfer to 3D. But any 2D medium I am probably going to enjoy, and I've dabbled in many different mediums, but there's just something about acrylic painting that I just really love. I love the process of it. I know a lot of painters prefer oil over acrylic, and one of the reasons is that acrylic dries super fast, but I actually love that. I like to paint in layers, and so it really works with the way that I work. And as far as like the surrealism, I've always had a tendency to stick with realism. It's just always been kind of what I'm best at. And for a long time, especially in like high school, I always felt my style was kind of boring, that I didn't have a distinct style. And when I started to kind of bring in a more surrealist vibe to the work that I was doing, I really loved that because I felt like I was still doing that realism, but I was putting my own little twist on things.
Thank you. Kind of stemming off of that one and even your response to the last question, are there any pieces in particular that you feel are more successful or that maybe has like another story behind it? I know you shared the one about the box cutter. Any pieces that you're particularly proud of or anything like that?
I would say possibly the piece I'm most proud of is that one with the box cutter, because I think it does do a really good job of, like, when you hear the story and you see it, I think it really, like, you can see the story in the painting.
kind of stemming away from the work we're seeing in front of us, I'd love to hear more about your creative process and your practice. You know, a lot of artists might have a routine, or some might not be routine oriented at all. So, would you like to share more about what your creative practice looks like? Like, do you plan things out, or do you choose a more free-flowing process?
Yeah, I would say I definitely do both. It all starts out kind of back to the question about inspiration. It all typically starts out that way, just like something completely random will trigger an image to pop up in my head. The next step is I'll usually write it down in my phone. I have probably hundreds of ideas written down in my phone, and most of them will never end up becoming a piece, but I always have that like bank of ideas that I can go back to when I'm not sure what to make. And then typically the next question I'll ask when I want to make a painting is I'll take the idea and I'll think, well, about what medium would best serve like bringing that image into real life. And I would say like 90% of the time, my answer is acrylic painting. And then from there, I do a lot of planning when I'm starting a piece. I'll create a reference image. I'll literally write down like a step-by-step plan of like how I'm going to get through the painting. But that's mostly just a way to get me started. I think anyone here that is any kind of artist knows that the hardest part of art is just like literally starting a piece. So I'll make the plan mostly as just a way to figure out how to get started so that I can just start and not like just procrastinate forever. And then once I do get started, it tends to kind of loosen up a little bit, and I'll just kind of go with the flow of the painting.
Yeah, and you mentioned references. I told you I might have an additional question that I didn't write before, but I was curious how like what references you draw from or what you're looking at when you create certain pieces. The one in particular I'm thinking of is the skeleton with the plastic over it. If you used some sort of source material to pull the imagery.
Yeah, so it's different piece to piece. I'll basically ask myself, like, what will be the easiest way for me to get an image that's close enough to what my vision is that I can work from it. Because I'm so focused on realism, I do prefer to work from a reference piece. I can't really just like paint from my mind. And like I said, it's different piece to piece. With some pieces, I'll physically create a setup and take a photo of it. I did that with I think all these three pieces. And I think I did that with this one as well. I bought a model skull and I just propped it up on like a broomstick and then I put a plastic sheet over it.
Yeah, I had to. I'll just do a few more questions and then we'll open up to everyone else if they have questions as well. What are some things that stimulate your creativity, or how do you remain motivated and inspired? Are there any practices you do outside of the planning aspect that kind of get you inspired or in the zone to create?
Yeah, there's a few things. One is just looking at art, other people's art. I find that endlessly inspiring, and it inspires me. I'll be like, I want to make a painting like that. I don't want it to look exactly like that, but I want it to kind of feel like that. Music is also another source of inspiration for me. I love music. I've never been particularly musical myself, so I've never created music, but there have been many times where I've listened to a song that I just think is so beautiful and has such a strong feeling that I've been like, I want to make a painting that feels the way this song feels.
I like that. Yeah, I think music is definitely a really great place to draw inspiration from. So are there any projects that you're currently working on, or anything that you're excited about lately, or perhaps even what kinds of things you might be thinking about doing in the future?
Yeah, I'm definitely working on more paintings. I'm working on kind of a series right now that I hope someday I can do an exhibition with. I'm also working on a lot of smaller illustration pieces. I've been doing a lot of colored pencil illustrations lately of different magical world things. Like I've made a lot of little moth illustrations. Moths are really cool. There's crazy moths out there that look like they're from like fairy tale like lands.
Cool. Yeah, I love colored pencil too. So what advice would you give to someone to inspire them to create something?
My advice is always literally just do it. Every time someone's like, "Oh, I wish I could be an artist like you," I always tell them you can. You just have to make art. And I am a strong believer that the only reason that I paint as well as I do is that I've just done it over and over and over and over again. I think is if you're gonna do something over and over again for years, you're probably gonna get good at it. So yeah, my advice is always just to do it. Even if it's not gonna be good at first, it might not be good at first, but
Great advice. And the last question from me, and then if anyone else has questions. So how can folks find more of your work or keep up to date with what current or future projects you have going on?
yeah, I would say what I update the most is my Instagram, which is just Thiago Porraz, just my name, no spaces or anything. I also have a website. It's thiagoporraz.square.site. And I do have some business cards, and I post them over there. If anyone would like to pick one up.
Nice. Thank you. Well, thank you for, tolerating me and my questions. Does anyone else have any questions for Thiago?
Yeah, my kid too, just a little bit curious. You're a fairly young person.
Yeah.
So death, transition, will think. So how does that come into your consciousness? How did that start?
I'm not totally sure. I don't know. It's been something that I've thought about. I think probably since I was in like high school. So I don't know. It's kind of fuzzy. I can't remember like the origins of it really. But it's kind of just been something I've thought about from time to time for years. I will say also that I am a little bit older than I look.
Your friends think you're a little strange.
I think my friends are just as strange as I am.
Any other questions?
As someone who has also worked in retail for quite a long time, do you think that plays a part into how you format like your paintings, like specifically like those still life ones, and how they like that one right behind you kind of looks like a vignette to me, like from clothing and like that situation? Do things like that play a part in how you lay out your paintings?
I see what you're saying, and I have never thought about it, but I think it may have like subconsciously. It's interesting that you point out this piece actually because the inspiration from this piece I think was mostly I bought this pink bottle at a thrift store, and I wanted to make a still life painting, and then I saw these two candles at Kohl's, which is where I was working, and I was like, I want to paint those candles. So that's kind of how this painting came together.
Cool.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I can ask another one. Besides acrylics and doing like illustrations, what's your other type of medium that you like best?
I would say my second favorite after acrylic paint is ink pen, like micron pens. I like to do stippling, not often because it's kind of mind numbing, but also like crosshatch. I really like the stark black and white look of that medium.
Any more takers?
Can I just make a statement? When you say you're influenced by music, I can see it. I see like album covers, like pieces and parts of album covers and stuff like that. And they just, if I didn't know you, I would know. I feel like they came from music. They had music in them already. So.
Solid observation. Yes.
Are there any artists that have influenced you?
I'm bad with artist names, but I will say Frida Kahlo since high school has always been a big inspiration, and I got to see an exhibition of her work in Detroit when I was in high school, and that was definitely a huge inspiration.
now that you mentioned that, I can see the connection between your work and freedom. All right, well, if no one else has any other questions, I think that'll wrap up our talk. Again, thank you all for coming, and thank you, Thiago, for sharing more about your work